Hi everybody. Today I'm going to be working on the monthly challenge from the Friends of Colouring Heaven Facebook group, and this month the challenge is inspired by World Alzheimer's Day, which is on the 21st of September. So if anyone is affected by that and feel that they can't really watch the video, then I completely understand, because I'm sure I will mention it at some point, especially at the beginning when I am explaining the challenge. Then please feel free to turn off now, and thank you so much for watching so far. But the challenge this month, as I've said, is based on Alzheimer's awareness. And the challenge is, because the statistic in Britain is that 1 in 3 people will develop dementia during their lifetime, you were to take a picture from Colouring Heaven and colour it 3 different ways, either using 3 different colour schemes or 3 different mediums or something along those lines, and you could split it up any way you wanted to. So I've chosen a picture from this Fairies Compendium. I believe the picture I've chosen is by Christine Karron. And it is this lady here. And I've chosen a picture that represents a kind of older lady, because that's what we think of when we think of the Alzheimer's or the dementia. I will leave a link in the description as well to the Alzheimer's Society website, so anyone who's wanting more information can go there and have a bit of a read. And my idea is to have the picture fading, maybe starting at the bottom and being in full colour, moving it maybe into sepia, and then into maybe black and white, more of a pencil sketch toward the top, with the line art maybe disappearing. I wanted to make it kind of poignant in a way that when a person does get Alzheimer's or dementia, their memories fade, the person you knew in essence starts to fade. And I wanted to try and bring that through in the colouring, with this lady fading off into the distance there, into the black and white, the pencil sketch towards the top. And I'm hoping I can make this work. As usual, I'm jumping in with both feet before I've actually planned out the actual mechanics of what I'm actually going to do. But I was thinking maybe to use the watercolour pencils down towards the bottom, blend it kind of into a coffee sort of colour here in the middle to bring in the sepia tones, kind of like a sepia photograph, and then towards the top just have the drawing pencils come in and make the top more of a pencil sketch, fading away towards the top of the picture. So that's my basic idea. Hopefully I can make that work as a kind of tribute to and raising awareness of the people who do suffer from the Alzheimer's or the dementia. I will try to focus mainly on the techniques and how I'm actually getting the effects that I'm using. But as I've said, if anybody is affected by the Alzheimer's or dementia and they feel like they can't watch the video, then I completely understand, and I will see you in future videos. So that's the idea behind what I'm aiming to actually show here. And for anyone who has stuck around and would like to see the techniques of how I've actually made this picture work, then I'll zoom us in and we'll get started. Okay, I've zoomed us in a little bit closer there so we can see a bit better what I'm actually doing. And as I said, I'm not entirely sure how this idea will work. It's just a little kind of idea I've had in my head. I'm not entirely sure how to get it down onto the paper, but the only way to find out is to try, I'm thinking. And I thought that I would start, as I said, down the bottom here using the watercolour pencils. And I thought for the coloured portion of this picture down the bottom here, I haven't drawn in any straight lines to divide the picture. I want it to be quite organic, kind of maybe barely noticeable. The way the picture fades out into basically nothing at the top, that's how I kind of wanted the whole idea to come across, to portray the way the illness kind of progresses and to hopefully help raise a little bit of awareness, get a few more people to go and read up on that website that I will link in the description. And as for colourways, I thought I'd stick to the yellow and the blue from the logo, the Forget-Me-Not logo of the Alzheimer's Society, to again keep with the theme. So I've took out my Albrecht Durer pencils and I've pulled out all the blues here. And I've also got this is a Arteza watercolour pencil, that's apricot, because I'm not entirely confident on my abilities to mix a flesh tone with the colours I do have in the pencils. But in the Albrecht Durer pencils I do have Ultramarine, that is 120. I have Phthalo blue, and I think I actually have 2 Phthalo blues there. I'm only going to be needing 1. And I have the Ultramarine light there. And I wanted to make the lady's dress the blue colour, maybe bring in a bit of an ochre and a yellow into the book when we get onto that with the gold lettering. And I've brought in this Arteza pencil, as I said, for the flesh tones. I will go ahead and shade with the colour pencils. I just wanted to use these watercolour pencils to give a bit of a base. to my colouring, as I couldn't really figure out a way to get this idea through with using the markers. I wouldn't be able to blend as well, I don't think, and I wanted to blend into that kind of coffee colour wash in the middle of the picture. I do seem to be really loving painting with the coffee at the moment, so I thought I'd maybe carry on that to bring in my sepia tones in the middle. For the main part of the lady's dress here, I thought I'd keep to this light kind of ultramarine. I'll make the main part of her dress light with the darker blues coming in for the cape she has coming down over her shoulders there. I'm thinking maybe to come up to about here with the coloured portion of the illustration there, bringing in the sepia with maybe the sketch starting to filter in at the top of the image there. It didn't say that we have to actually divide our picture into equal sections, so hopefully this will fit in with the challenge. I've gotten a little bit carried away there, and I've carried on behind here, which is actually the cape of our fairy here. So I'm going to go over that with the darker Albrecht Durer pencil. This is the, what is this one? This is the Ultramarine. So I'm going to put that in for her cape in the background here. This will probably be a long process colouring this picture, so it will probably be filmed over a couple of days. If the lighting does change, then I do apologise, but that will be why. This will be over a couple of days. I think, yeah, about up to there. These gold bits of jewellery I will probably do with the gold Sharpie, like I've done the outside of the frame here, to keep those the same throughout the picture, and her earrings, so the jewellery stands out. And we do want this watercolour to be bleeding into the coffee here, the kind of coffee sepia tones we want coming in for this part of the image here. So I'm going to actually, instead of diluting this watercolour here with the plain water, I will try maybe diluting that into the coffee, so we have a kind of a blend going on there, and I'm hoping that will work. I've gotten a little bit enthusiastic there again. That part should be the actual sleeve, so we do need the lighter tone in that, although we will be blending it into the coffee there. For this book here, I'm bringing in a bit of a yellow ochre to bring in that yellow tone from the logo, and I'm working with the light yellow ochre, that's 183 in the Albrecht Durer pencils. Again, towards the top of the book, we're going to be blending that into the coffee. Hopefully, if this plan works, the coffee will be coming in sort of here, I would imagine. So you want to actually blend that into the wash of the coffee colour, which I've hopefully made light enough to work for this idea that I have in mind. I'll just do a little bit of a scribbly sort of texture here, because this book, I would imagine, would be really old leather. It's like a really old kind of tome of a book there, with its gold lettering and gold filigree I think we'll have going on there. So we want this to look really old and kind of leathery. And maybe bring in the coffee tones more here towards the top of the book, because when I bring in the coffee, it will be a wash over the whole image, hopefully blending down into our colour quite nicely there. And for the background, I was thinking of going for a dark brown, so that the background could be dark towards the bottom of the picture here, where we have actually got the colour going on, fading into the coffee, darker sepia tones here, and then up into the grey. So I'll just bring that in into the background here. This is walnut brown, this one is. I'm being a little bit scribbly with my texture here, because the pencil will hopefully be dissolving, especially up here. It should be dissolving into that wash of coffee, which I want to be introducing. And as usual, I'm figuring things out as I go here. For the stems of these plants, I've got the permanent olive green, which is 167. I want to try and keep the colours fairly desaturated, although we will be in full colour down the bottom here, as I've said, fading off. But to keep that change not as noticeable and not a harsh straight line, I do want my colours to be fairly desaturated, maybe giving a little bit of an ochre sort of overtone here, as I did in my finished pages video on that last picture, that little experiment I was doing, making a picture look as if I was colouring on top of coffee even if I wasn't. So I've brought in my little tub of water here, and for the bottom parts of our image, I'm just going to activate these watercolour pencils and give us a nice base to shade on top of. And as usual, the brush is not the best, but I think it's up to the job. It'll do what I needed to do, I think, so we'll stick with it. As I've said, this paper is the older Colouring Heaven paper, so it does take the watercolour better than the newer paper, I think, but still, it's not watercolour paper, so I don't want to go super crazy with the water. Okay, we're coming up into our sepia tone area here, so I'm going to bring in the coffee, which I have in this pot here. Here's my pot of coffee. I'm hoping this wash is light enough to be barely noticeable. Just have the changing tone in the background there. And using it to dilute the actual watercolour pencil towards these top edges to again try and bring in the changing colour, but being very, very subtle about it, hopefully. So as not to be super noticeable that we are changing into that sepia kind of tone. And shifting again to the clean water to blend down here. I do have a separate third pot of water here. This is just for washing the brush in between and cleaning with a piece of kitchen towel. So moving on back to the coffee here after washing the brush. And I want this sepia tone to go across the whole of the picture. From, as I say, about this level. And again, coming onto the book. So we're using the coffee to dilute this ochre colour pencil a little bit. And same this side, from this very top, kind of colouring with the watercolour pencil. I'm going to blend that out with the coffee before switching back to the clean water. Oops, gone a little bit crazy there. We'll make it work. The green has blobbed out, but I think we're going to be able to make that work. Hopefully this kind of ochre coffee sort of wash is showing up on the camera. And onto the clean water. Hopefully we can blend out the harsh line there to try and make sure the coffee isn't making a harsh blend, because we do want this to be a kind of natural sort of changing of the colours, barely noticeable. Realised I've forgotten the lady's hair, so I'm going to go in with the yellow colour again, the same light ochre that we used for the book, just to do her hair there. So far I'm thinking there's a lot of trusting the process that's going to be going on here. Still not entirely sure I'll be able to make this work, but hopefully if you are watching this then it has worked. Okay, let's go for a little, maybe a splashing of that coffee onto the white of the paper up there, just to help that blend in a little bit. And now I think it's time to be letting that dry, so we'll be coming back to it probably tomorrow now and see what we can make of that. But so far, yep, it's kind of looking how I expected it to, but as I said, there will be a little bit of trusting the process involved here to try and make that work. A lot of shading over the top to blend those areas into each other nicely. So I'll be catching up with you tomorrow, which for you will probably be in a moment or two, so we'll see how she dries. Okay, we have actually zapped ahead to a couple of days later now. And you can see that I have actually started working on shading this half of the picture. I've zoomed us in so we can get a little bit of a look at that before I go on to showing you how I was actually doing it. And you can see that I have, I think, succeeded in making my transitions between these three areas of the picture as subtle as I wanted to, with barely being able to tell where the colour actually changes, which was the idea that I was actually going for this picture. And you can see here I've blended the coloured portion into the sepia portion by going over the top with a little bit of an ochre, yellow ochre kind of colour, which hopefully is showing up on the camera because this camera really doesn't like yellow, so I'll probably have to boost these colours in editing again. And I have tried to stick to the Albrecht Durer pencils, just to go over the top with the extra shading, just to save trying to match between all my pencils to try and get a nice colour match happening there. I have actually brought in the Polychromos black and the Polychromos white, also for a little bit of a shading, the black mainly for these darkest areas here, and for bringing in on the pencil shaded kind of part of her hair here up at the top of the picture. And for the white, I have just tried to blend these colours slightly more down here instead of putting more water in and adding more layers of the actual activated pencils. I've just tried to lighten off my pressure, leave a tiny layer of the colour, and then go over with the white just to maybe blend that and make it look a little bit smoother. I've brought in some white gel pen down the edges here, which I pretty much knew I was going to do, so I kind of played with that and bargained with that as I was going along. Bore that in mind is probably a better way to say that. I bore that in mind as I was going along. There probably would be the white gel pen coming in. I've tried to phase that out slightly as I have blended up into the more pencil shaded area up here, just to show the picture is getting more and more sketchy as we move up towards the top there. The pencil shading I have done with this pencil, which is one that I had on my desk, and that is a sketching pencil grade F. I don't want to go too much into that because I am planning to do a video on colouring with the drawing pencils, which I will probably get onto after I've actually finished colouring this picture. But that is a pencil that I actually had on my desk at the time, and I think it's not too different from an HB, just a normal drawing pencil, so I went with that. Just to add a little bit of these sketchy pencil lines, a little bit of shading along her face, and I've got my lines slightly fading off as we get further towards the top of her head there. I have gone over the lines with the white gel pen, just to show that the page, as I've said, is fading off towards the top. I've brought in the gold Sharpie for a little bit of the jewellery here and for her earrings, just to keep that really simple without too much shading or bringing in different colours. I've just done my lazy gold with the gold Sharpie, a little bit of dark brown shading and the white highlights. But I think that's enough of an explanation we've got going on there. So I'll move on to the other side of the page now, and I'll try and show you how I was getting those effects, how I was getting those layers of the picture kind of melding into each other subtly so that the change isn't super obvious. I've just scooted us over to the other side there, and I just want to show you mainly the areas where the kind of layers of colouring blend together to show you how I was getting that actually happening. I don't want to go into too much detail and have the video drag on for absolutely hours and hours, because yeah, that's not much fun for any of us. So I'm just going to go into this kind of cloak she has going on here with the darker blue. This is the Ultramarine, yep, the Ultramarine. Just putting in a few of the shadows. And as we are along the kind of area here where we are blending into where we want our sepia colour to be coming in, I'm just going to go very, very lightly with a little tiny bit of that dark blue, because we do want a little bit of the blue, and we're going to bring in the brown to be shading there. As her dress here is the lighter blue, I'm going in with the Ultramarine light. This one is a little bit battered looking by now, so I'm just going to add a little bit of shading here. The rest of the picture down towards the bottom would be shaded any normal way that I would shade any kind of picture. But I think for her dress on the other side, this was actually yesterday I was doing it, and I can't quite remember, but I think I was bringing in the phthalo blue, I'm not entirely sure how to pronounce that, but I was bringing in the other darker shade of blue, just to give a little bit more depth to the shading down the bottom here, because the closer to the bottom of the picture we want the shading to be more apparent, look a little bit more solid, like the further down towards the bottom of the picture we're going. Getting a little bit carried away there. I'm only supposed to be showing you guys their highlights, as I said, to keep the video fairly short. This is the phthalo blue. Phthalo blue. I'll put all the numbers in the description below, but I am sticking to the same kind of colours that I did use for putting down the washes for a base colour. And I was just bringing this in to darken these areas in the shadows, if I'm remembering rightly how I did it. And there is a little bit of hair here I forgot to do, so I'll come in with the light ochre. I do want to be concentrating around this area though, as I said, because that is where we have our transitions happening, and I wanted to really show you the main point of the video is to show the idea and explain how I was getting these kind of sections fading into each other, and maybe be a little bit of a springboard of ideas for people if they wanted to show their picture actually fading off into white paper. It's an idea to play with, as most of my ideas do tend to be. So I'm adding a little tiny bit of the pencil into the middle of the arm there. And what I was doing was coming in with the Polychromos white and just blending that out very slightly to smooth it out. Like that. And I was bringing in the Polychromos black, find that one, and just adding a few of the darkest shadows to again try and make this bottom part of the picture look fairly solid, fairly well coloured, fairly pigmented, I suppose is the word, pretty solid looking. Just pop a little bit of the hair colour in there as well. Remind me I do have to get that coloured. And which way did I have my shadows going? It looks as if I have my light coming from the left here. So I'll just pop in a little bit of a shadow for that hair there. Again, going for the three-dimensional sort of look. I'll add some of this black up here around the jewellery. But to make that area bleed down or blend down quite subtly into this area of the blue, we want the blue fading into the sepia colour here. So I'm bringing in, I think it's Van Dyck brown. Yeah, this is Van Dyck brown. And adding to those dark blue shadows that we did do there with a little bit of the Van Dyck brown, so that we do also have a hint of the blue behind there. Blending this down into the blue. And I was also coming in with the light ochre colour. This is called burnt ochre. And overlaying that over the blue and just lightening off the pressure as we go further down towards into the blue area of the picture. But we just want this edge to be looking more kind of subtle, less obvious, so I'm blending a little bit of the ochre into the blue there. Like so, and I think her hair would be actually shaded with this ochre. So I've used the actual yellow to colour her hair, so we want that fading up. And I've also brought in this ochre over the background brown. So I think I was doing that with the darkest brown. Darkest brown is this walnut brown. So I'm keeping this mainly towards where Our Lady actually is, our fairy, to give the darker shadow around her. Even though, as I said, my light is coming from the left, we still want to have kind of a dark area behind Our Lady because, as usual, I'm thinking I will be using the white gel pen highlights around the outside of her clothes there. So around where Our Lady is here, I'm pressing pretty hard with the pencil, easing off from the pressure as we're coming into the middle of this background here, but still keeping a very light layer of that darker brown. It would probably work better if I did bring in the water and kind of dilute and activate that brown into the middle of the background. But as I've said, this paper doesn't take watercolour super well. It's not actually watercolour paper, so I don't really want to press it and risk destroying the paper. And then we're coming in with the lighter ochre colour, coming quite a way down into the actual coloured portion of the image there. But as the background is brown, I'm figuring it can possibly take it. And this colour, this light ochre, what is it called? Burnt ochre, this is called. That's the main colour that I was using for the shading. Coming up into this coffee stained area of the picture, this is the main colour I was using for shading. Bringing in the browns as well for maybe a little bit of extra dark to the shadows. But the main point of blending these areas is to bring the yellow, or this kind of ochre colour, down into the blue. Not a super complicated technique and not really technical, not really a heck of a lot to be explaining, but yeah, bringing the brown down into the blue to bring this sepia kind of fading very, very slightly into that blue area. And as usual, anytime you think you need more shading, we can bring that in. And this is just, get back on camera, this is just reinforcing the original shading that we did when we did the original pencil before we came in and kind of activated and washed that blue out a little bit. This part under her arm with her shawl would be fairly dark, so I'm going to bring in that Polychromos black there. Just so as not to waste my Albrecht Durer black, to be perfectly honest. And with the white gel pen, as we can see on this other side here, I've brought in a few kind of sketchy lines. Which direction was I going? This kind of direction, I think. Yeah. Because as we want the page to be fading off into this sketchy kind of look towards the top of our image, I thought maybe we could start bringing in that idea by bringing in these sketchy lines with the white as our highlights instead of my usual lines, dots and dashes. We could bring in a little bit of that sketchy kind of feeling. Of course, her hair would probably have the usual hair highlights. We'll bring in the Van Dyck brown a little bit there just to shade her hair as it comes behind her arm. And we can highlight any lines that we think could do with being picked out a little bit. Any little shadowy lines. For the areas of gold, just to keep things really simple, I'm going in with the gold Sharpie. And for any areas I think would be the actual gold, such as this hinge on or corner decoration. This is a corner decoration, right? Yeah, those are the clasps on the front. These are corner decorations. I was just picking those out with the gold, just as I've done for her jewellery. Just to keep things fairly simple, not have to mess around with shading mainly, or bringing in any other pencils to try and get a colour combination for gold happening. Small areas like this are kind of hard to colour with a gold combination with more than maybe 2 or 3 pencils anyways. So yeah, any areas that were gold, I was just filling in with that gold Sharpie. And as that is drying, I will show you here that I was shading with the darkest brown. I think this is the hazelnut brown again. Walnut brown rather. I was just shading that, and I think there was originally a pattern drawn in there, but just, as I've said, for simplicity's sake, I'm just turning them into like gold sort of discs there, holding on a cape. And once the shading of the brown is done, just a few little wire highlights there to show that we are shining away with the gold. And I'm going to carry on this background here with the light ochre, burnt ochre. I keep calling it light ochre, it's called burnt ochre. It's one of my favourite colours that I do actually have with the Albrecht Durer. And I'm just putting in a little bit of a darker kind of area of colour here around the edge of our fairy lady, as we do want to start to have that sepia colour start sort of merging its way in here, merging into the blue. So this will be the main colour for shading. And we are, of course, going on top of a layer of coffee here. So colours, in any case, would be a tiny little bit subdued because we are working on top of that coffee. that is what I'm aiming for, so I'm quite pleased that is how that's actually happening. And we have gotten a little bit messy here. We can see a few splashes of coffee here, but yeah, it doesn't bother me too much because I know that I am not the neatest. I've kind of come to expect it. I'm just bringing in that brown further down into our book as well. And where my hair comes behind here. For skin, I'm trying to make the shading a little bit lighter because we do have that coffee in the background there. So I can actually keep the shading fairly light because we do have a sort of base skin tone going on there with the wash of coffee in the background. So I'm just going to add a little bit of shading. I'm working with the pencil that we do actually have down there already. I'll be going ahead and just doing this earring with the gold Sharpie as I showed here, adding a little bit of the dark brown shading and a few white highlights. Though of course anything I do mention, as always, entirely optional. The whole point is to show the idea. Maybe somebody can take the idea and run with it. That's usually my aim when making these videos, a sort of inspiration, maybe a bit of an idea that people can take and adapt any way that they want to use it themselves. And I just thought it was working and looking quite nice, having all these separate areas of the picture actually merging into each other and having the page actually fading itself off up into the pencil shading into the white paper at the end. So if that is an idea you think you can just pick up and run with, and maybe have your pages fading out into lighter and lighter colours, it may be an idea you can play with. Partly working on from the little experiment. If anybody's seen my finished pages video, there was a little experiment towards the end where I tried to show colouring this kind of coffee effect with coloured pencils. So it's kind of building onto that, bringing in the shading on top of the actual coffee with the coloured pencils. Although I'm trying to keep things fairly simple, so I'm not bringing in my watercolour sort of effects, drawing them in with the pencils, and I'm trying to keep the actual watercolour wash just to the very base coat. Whereabouts did we have the ochre? The ochre came up to about here, but yeah, my transitions between the areas are not well defined anyway, so not particularly planned or thought out. I'm trying to match where I actually came up to with the coffee, but this side is fairly faint. I think I did blend it into some clean water here as I was laying down that coffee, if I remember right, to try and make that fairly subtle change from the white paper down into the coffee. It's slightly more obvious here, although again, there we go, slightly more obvious there, but again, I'm not sure that will be showing up super well on the camera, as my camera tends not to pick up yellow very well, but I will attempt to show you how the idea was actually working. I'll bring in a little bit of this burnt ochre, not light ochre, around Our Lady there, and I'll show you how I was going on with the shading. I was mainly using this Van Dyck brown. That seems to work quite well with the coffee and be a darker shade of the burnt ochre, so I was bringing in that. Trying to keep it, as I've said, not so obvious. Blurring the lines between the sections of this colouring that we've got going on. Tiny little bit of the yellow actually in to the hair there. It's called, what's this one called? Oh, this one is called light ochre. This is the light ochre, more of a yellow colour. Just bringing a little bit of that into her hair, judging from what I did on the other side here, but kind of tapering it off as the ochre colours start to take over here with the sepia sort of idea we've got going on. And I do want my shading to be lighter and lighter as I'm getting towards the top of the picture, as we're going sketchier and sketchier towards the top of the picture. I probably won't colour the whole thing on camera. I just want to give you kind of overview of how I was blending these kind of edges into each other and give you maybe an idea to play with, as I said. I'm thinking that may be enough to give a little bit of an idea. As we've done before already, we can go in with the black, pick out any lines that we think might need picking out, might need to be a little bit more kind of defined. And coming up to the top of the picture here, as we can see around about here, kind of maybe nose level there, the bottom of her nose, I've started to bring in the pencil shading. I was also using the Payne's Grey. This is the Payne's Grey Albrecht Durer pencil, just for a little bit of light shading. But mainly I wanted to look as if it was actually drawn with the pencil, so I was coming in with the drawing pencil, just this one here. I don't want to go too much detail into this because I am planning on having a video showing how I do colouring with drawing pencils. I have a work in progress just done with drawing pencils. So I do actually want to be doing it on camera, maybe talking a little bit about colouring with drawing pencils. So I don't want to go too much into the actual colouring with drawing pencils, but yeah, basically using just the drawing pencil for a little bit of shading, just a normal shading as I would do on the face, making it fairly sketchy instead of trying to blend and coming in with maybe a cotton bud or something to smooth that over and blend it. I wanted to keep the lines fairly sketchy because I want the page to be kind of disintegrating or fading as it comes further up towards the top. So a little bit of the pencil shading there. I'll come in with the Payne's Grey for a slightly more blended sort of little bit of shading. Again, any lines that you think might need picking out, come in with the black there. And again, where these areas are kind of merging into each other, I'm using the ochre, burnt ochre, yep, that's right, burnt ochre and the Payne's Grey for a little bit of shading down the bottom of her face here, where both areas are sort of merging. I'm trying to blend that ochre colour into the grey, into the drawing pencil. To kind of blur the edges where the two areas of different types or colours of colouring are meeting there. Trying to make the distinction a bit less obvious. Doesn't matter too much if the areas don't match on both sides. I want it to be less obvious. So if it's slightly wonky, that doesn't matter. I don't want the lines to be super strict. I just want these areas to look as if they are very, very slightly blending into each other, slowly fading towards the top of the picture. Just finish this a little bit so you can kind of see what I mean, bringing in the sepia colours and the kind of pencil shading into each other. I have used quite a lot of the black, you see, especially here around her ear where there is quite a dark shadow. Not so much of the white for blending. Into the sepia maybe. We can use the white for blending, as I did down on the blue part of our picture down here. But towards the top, I do want those sketchy lines to be actually showing, the pencil strokes. I want those to be showing, I want those to be obvious. So I was using less of the actual white for blending and trying to make the pencil the most important part, trying to make the pencil the most important part of the actual shading towards the top of the picture. And this side of the picture is a lot neater because, yeah, I'm trying to sit at an angle quite far away here to be able to actually do this on camera. But I think you can get the idea, get the gist of what I'm actually trying to do here. As usual, it's not working quite as well on camera as I managed to get it working off the camera. But this is the general kind of method that I was using to get things to blend together. If we look again over to the other side, we can see this is what I've been doing. Just bringing that pencil shading, hopefully that's visible here, bringing that pencil shading further down into the sepia, having that merge together, and having the sepia go up into the pencil shading very, very slightly. This side of the picture, the coffee stain is slightly darker, which works with my lighting coming from the left, so yeah, I can't really complain about it. But yeah, just tapering off that sepia shading as we're getting further towards the top there, bringing in the pencil, the drawing pencil, the Payne's grey, and the actual black for shading as we're getting further towards the top. I think having the coffee being slightly darker on the other side, that has helped quite a lot with being able to blend in that shading there. Maybe if I bring in a very, very slight touch of this yellow, that will help. Yes, that is helping, that is helping. A very, very slight touch of the yellow to try and compensate for the fact that the coffee is a lot darker on the other side. This, I'm going very, very lightly here, just to give a little bit of a background of the yellow. Not pressing so hard that the yellow colour is coming through super strongly as it is on the bug here. We just want a very, very slight hint of it, which I'm hoping is showing up on the camera. But yeah, we do want that very, very slight hint. So I'll just put a very, very, very soft layer of that the light ochre just to help the coffee colour in the background there. And because her hair is yellow anyways, I think that will all help. A little tiny touch of the walnut brown there, which is the very darkest colour we've used in the background, just to add a little bit of shade behind her ear. And I think that's looking fairly similar to what we have going on the opposite side there. Hopefully it's showing up as being fairly similar on camera. You can go in and do as many layers, as much shading as you think you need there, just trying to get those kind of areas of colour to blend in into each other. And as always, as many layers, as few layers as you like. And if you go in too much with your pencils, you can always bring in the eraser, knock it back a little bit there. And that's how I was doing the shading between the sepia colour and the pencil there. Heading up further towards the top here, I wanted to have the lines sort of fading away. So I'll just pop us upside down there. I will be doing a little bit more work onto the bottom part of this picture, especially on the book, finishing off her arm there. But just to give a general idea of how I was getting these layers merging into each other, we'll see here that I did bring in the white gel pen to start kind of making these lines disappear a little bit into the white paper there. And I was keeping my shading darker, more towards this part where the sepia is merging into the black and white kind of pencil sketch, and I was keeping my black. If I did use the black pencil, the Polychromos black, I was keeping that further down towards this part here and easing off with this area here being mainly just a few little touches of the drawing pencil to again add to that effect that the picture is fading off. Okay, with the black maybe coming no further than about there maybe. And then keeping the drawing pencil, what kind of angle am I going at? As the picture itself is kind of looking as if it could be a pencil sketch anyways. I was just adding a few little shady areas with the drawing pencil, a few little bits of pencil strokes for these tree branches as well, especially towards this top, keeping the shading fairly light, barely there, which will be getting darker and darker as we come further down towards where the sepia is blending in. A little bit of sepia shading there with the burnt ochre. I'll bring in the Payne's grey a little bit here. We're still trying to keep those pencil strokes with the actual drawing pencil fairly visible, because these watercolour pencils are fairly chunky, so any pencil strokes would be also fairly chunky, and I want these strokes to be really sketchy and light. And where the lines are fading away, I was coming in with the white gel pen and just going over the line art very, very slightly, not to cover it completely, just to fade it. So the top of this lady's head here, that is fading off almost completely into the background. And these bits of the background here also fading. So kind of sketchily, hopefully you can see on the camera what I actually mean. Very, very kind of sketchily going over the edges here of the line art, not covering it completely, just having it fade. I did actually try going over the line art with the eraser and seeing if I could make that any lighter. And if that had have worked, that would have been a great way to have that line art just fading out. But unfortunately, I don't think it did work super well. So I've stuck to going over with the white gel pen there and adding in a few kind of hatching sort of pen strokes. I'll just give my lady the usual highlights for her eye. As you see, we've gone ahead and done on the other side. So there we go, hopefully that's visible on the camera there, if I angle maybe a little bit. That's the kind of idea I was working on, to get these parts of the picture kind of fading into each other, fading off into the white towards the top. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to finish this off using the same kind of methods, it's exactly the same colours that I've just showed you, and I'll catch up with you when I'm done. I'll just show before I do go ahead and finish off the rest of the picture that I'm just going to shade the lady's skin with the, this one was an Arteza watercolour pencil, the apricot watercolour pencil, just to give that a little bit of colour, and I'll probably go ahead and shade that with the burnt ochre because that is a colour I usually use for skin anyway. So I'll go ahead and add a few little bits of shading with that, and that will be how I colour her skin. There we go, I'm going to be calling a finish for the day, I think. I've zoomed us out so we can see the picture as a whole and see how that transition is working from the full colour out at the bottom of the image right the way through to the barely there pencil sketch up at the top there. And today has been more of an idea or concept sort of video, I think, for inspiration, rather than a tutorial of any fancy techniques or anything like that I've been using. But hopefully it was interesting seeing how I did get those kind of tones or different colourways of the picture blending in together and working there, which I think has worked really well. And I'm also putting the video out to be raising a little bit of awareness. As I said, I will be putting the link in the description to the website of the Alzheimer's Society for anybody wanting any more information. Kind of a sad and a poignant one today, so I feel I don't really feel right saying if you've enjoyed the video. But anyone who has followed along and has kept with me right to the end, thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you'd like to see more, then please consider liking and subscribing. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you in future videos. Bye.